you're gonna get free this time. Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in
Welcome
that
back
song,
to
my
You,
friend.
Me, and the Elephant with Deb Air and,
Crystal clear.
in the vein of the organic nature of this podcast, this is how this episode was born. Last episode, we were noticing something like resistance come up to the topic that we were discussing. And so we thought, wow, this is something to look under the covers and check out. So today, the question is, do you resist resistance?
The answer is typically yes. However, what I have found is that as these podcasts just become even more alive in us, is that we're going through it. And so what I think we were feeling is, oh, resistance is the elephant. It just keeps coming up and we're like, oh, this theme keeps coming up and it's meant to be seen and heard and caressed by the elephant trunk. So I appreciate that
When
and
the
have learned
elephant,
quite a bit.
yes, absolutely. I think we both have. And I'm really personally loving this conversation. And as per usual, we've already had lots of it before we press record. And we were like, well, why don't we just press record and invite everybody in? So that's what we're doing. And we've learned that when the elephant taps its trunk enough times, just sit down and listen and pay attention. So, do you resist resistance? It's a funny thing because, in general, I think resistance is by nature, it's uncomfortable to some degree. It's something that feels like a charge in us, usually. It feels like a hand up, maybe even a stop. And I think that one of the things, as we started this conversation earlier, that I was recalling is how many times I've heard somebody on a table that I was working with say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Am I resisting you? And it's usually when what's happening for them in that moment is actually an energy that's coming up where they're feeling where some of their protective layers have been. This sounds cheesy, but unless you can feel it or find it, you can't heal it. And so that's what was happening. And I have told many people in that moment when they say that, oh, you're feeling that resistance. That's awesome because you are now connecting with those places that are under the radar that are usually stopping potential connections, potential growth points for you. And that resistance became a no. It became a way to reroute, let's say. And for myself, and it's why we're sharing this, I'm really ready to rewrite the story on what resistance is and what it can hold for us. And I think there's certainly a lot of judgment, self-judgment, and judgment of others when we feel others' resistance or we perceive other people feeling resistant. Like, I mean, something simple. I bring my son up all the time. You say something, and it's like resist, 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 resist. And then you're just like, oh my God. And usually we can, when we feel it in others, depending on our relationship, it's like it brings a resistance up in ourselves. And one of the things, as we sort of were sussing this out and dancing through this conversation, that really resistance is not a solo act. It's not a solo gig. And what we mean by that is that being resistant by nature, like I said, it has a charge. Something freezes in a moment, and often there will be an energy underneath, almost like of a pushback or push away. But in reality, we're resistant to something, and we're resistant to a cause, we're resistant to a person, a subject matter of some kind. Our body can be resistant to certain kinds of food, right? So it's not a solo act. And I think there's something to that feels important, because when we can rewrite the story on resistance, that resistance has a high value. if we can value it, if we can respect and have reverence for it, it's a whole different thing to turn the camera and consider what is underneath that resistance. What is it? How do we even consider going forth through it? I've said this before. It's like if a cheetah, you're in New York City and a cheetah, like some of the zoo animals got loose and a baby cheetah is like caught in an alley and they're fearful, there's going to be a resistance for that cheetah come up and climb on your lap and be pet, right? Doesn't mean that it doesn't want that at a different moment, but in that resistance moment, you don't want to go right at it with the same kind of resistance because it's going to scratch you. And one thing I have learned through my life is resistance grows resistance. So if you are feeling resistant, let's say in connection with somebody else, you're feeling their resistance and you get resistant from it because that's the energy. It just grows the resistance. And it's like having the cord wrapped around the neck. If the baby's born, it just chokes off life. And so it becomes a standstill. And sometimes that standstill is needed for a moment. And one of the things that came up, and as I just felt into this, what if resistance is more of that pause? It's like the yellow light at the stoplight. And often what we do with resistance is we make it a red light and it stays there. Or we feel resistance and it's just a hard no. I don't go there. That's not who I am. And we say that, or I say that, just saying we know that sometimes that is the truth. I don't go there, and that's okay. But resistance in itself is that place we feel like we want to either just stop, it's a hard no, or we want to run the bleep away. We want to go as far as we can. So, how can we honor this resistance when resistance comes up for us? That it's actually the place between the green and the red light. It's not just the one or the other. It's like when you go up to the stoplight and you're walking, it's like, wait. You listen to the wait, because if you keep going,
right.
you're going to get hit by a damn car. If you stop and you never go forward, you never cross the road and get to where you want to go.
Let alone the topic of how distracted we tend to be. How often are we even walking and we're plugged into something else? The honoring of the pause and the honoring of the wait is truly a conscious effort and habit that I know I've had to teach myself repeatedly and on the daily. My son at this point is walking around with his phone looking at YouTube, and I'm like, he don't even see the sign, he don't see the stop sign, he don't see the red light, he's just plugged into something else. But so the point of it is that the wait and the pause are very important. You have to have your eyes open. You have to.
I totally agree with you. And I will say this, waiting and pausing when you're on your phone and walking around is one thing. But when you're in a moment of resistance, you have to pause in an urgency feel, like within the middle of urgency. And for the resistance part, that's probably one of the most hardest times to actually go, oh, this is a wait, this is a pause, right?
Totally.
And so you have to go anti-urgency. There's a charge there, and I think that it's really important to again rewrite the story and say, hey, I'm going to honor that there's a charge here and own it. What if we remember that in the resistance is a wisdom? It's literally this gift that's coming to you saying, hey, there's some wisdom that wants to be alchemized and being brought to you on your doorstep. And if it's just always a stop and you never cross the road, or if it's always like you go into traffic and get hit by a car, self-fulfilling prophecy, see, I was right, then you never get into the middle of the red and the green, and you never really potentially ever get the wisdom nugget. It was Guy Finley who said, on the other side of resistance is the flow of real life. That really hit me in a way that the aha of that is that when we can actually not only begin to honor that these charges come up, that there's a value for resistance, that there is really a reverence, there's a wisdom that's saying, wait. And you and I have gone through this many different times, right? And sometimes I'll be honest, we walk right into resistance. We may be clueless. It's kind of like you were just saying with your son. We don't live near each other. We haven't maybe been in each other's space for a while, and we just jump on Zoom and we may be in two different rhythms. Well, that usually will bring up some kind of resistance, or we feel that maybe one of us has a resistance. And then what does that do in each of us? It brings up a resistance, which goes back to that, are you resisting resistance? That certainly has happened to me, where if I feel, let's say I'm going to hallucinate and say, I feel like I'm saying this thing and Crystal's resistant against it. I'm now in my resistance, because really what I'm doing is if I'm taking her resistance as a no, then I'm taking it that I'm not able to be heard. She's not acknowledging me. She doesn't honor what I'm saying. I could go down a plethora of tracks. If I can realize that resistance is this stepping stone into the real flow of life, it's actually percolating. It's like spring is emerging right now. It is literally time for that to poke its head out, because otherwise it'll just be the unsaid, and the elephant keeps certainly growing. Because now I've had to make stories with, let's say in this example, that Crystal just doesn't appreciate blah blah blah, or I don't appreciate her blah blah blah. And we've gone through this, and what I've noticed too is when we've gone through this with each other, the more love and reverence we have, we know that there's actually a vulnerable version of us right behind that, that's saying like, hear me, feel me, see me. And I was just sharing with Crystal some work aspect that we were going to do, that I had initially I had a real strong resistance to. I just would want to go, yeah, fine, because I actually am less good at the no. And they're all going to think I'm hard, I'm a bitch, I'm whatever it is, right? So for me, I've gone down the yes when I didn't mean it. And what does that build? That builds resentment, because I didn't honor the resistance, the pause that said, just wait. There's more data for you. There's something for you to feel and recognize about yourself in relationship to when you feel resistance to something or someone. And so that happened, and I was able to have a great conversation with Crystal about this and say, in the past, I've just said yes to this, and then it ends up not being what I want. And then I'm frustrated with myself. I'm frustrated because I feel like I'm never really seen or heard, or whatever, something of that nature. And then another part rolled as this thing is rolling out that I didn't really like. And then that part of me wanted to initially go back and be like, oh, see? And I was like, no. Actually, it's just part of the evolution. So meaning that, like, sometimes when we have resistance to something, and we can be with that energy and be in the space between the green and the red, sometimes along the way that resistance will come up again, but it won't have as much charge, because you've alchemized some of that, you've nurtured some of that, you've realized pieces of yourself that were resistant in relationship to that same thing. So now there's more data, there's more of you interfacing with whatever that thing is. It could still be a sensitive piece, because it's not about the thing. Like in this case, in my case, it wasn't about the thing, the website we were talking about. It was actually about, where have I said yes when I've meant no? And I can't even get to the in between, because I'm just saying yes. Or how many of us have said yes to intimate things and didn't mean it because we didn't know how to say no? Or how many times have we said no to things because we're just absolutely frightened, and we never even get to what is the yes in the middle that we didn't even get to discover about ourselves, because we're constantly narrowing our range of what we're able to relate to, because our safety level continues to narrow and minimize.
I feel that what has happened for me, because this has come up so much in all of our lives as a part of it, but what I really appreciate is the fact that you and I especially can go into that space and have this conversation. And there's times where I'm like, absolutely, I'll dive right in. Let's go. This is such a juicy place to be. And then there's times where I know where it was a strong edge for me and I'm like, oh, I desire not to go there. And because I was in a space where I was not alone, you didn't leave me. You didn't say, that girl's resisting. You held the container, you stayed present, and we did this dance back and forth of let's figure it out. Those moments where my resistance was so strong, and I'm just speaking for myself, remembering my examples of my resistance was so strong. However, being in that place of being seen and heard and knowing that I didn't have to go it alone and have the reflection and the love that was there when I necessarily couldn't provide it for myself, but it was there in the space, actually provided a powerful change, a powerful awareness and transformation, not only in myself, but like within our relationship. And it
Yeah.
was so meaningful that it just and that's what I kind of meant by bringing up my son in the phone is like, it's not something that you just do when resistance arises. It's what you do in life. In life, you have to pause. In life, you have to honor the rest and the spaces in between because there's magic in there. And it sometimes is not going to be the where you think the magic is coming from, like resistance, right? We were talking about resistance kind of gets the bad rap. It's like the one that we're like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
That could be a harder no. I just remember and appreciate those places where it could have been like a hard no for me, reroute, keep going. That really, that container and not being alone provided a really powerful change within myself.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know what? It's not comfortable. Do you know what I mean? If we're in the resistance and we just going to do the hard stop or the hard run, then we're trying to get comfortable. And sometimes can we invite a little bit more discomfort? It's just a little messy right underneath the charge. Charge is a tough thing because when we feel resistance, we have charge. And that is something that has a lot of energy. So energy is something we need more of. How many people feel exhausted? How many people feel sad or depressed or highly anxious? Have lost our ability to hack into energy. Like Guy says, on the other side of resistance is the flow of real life, AKA energy. So when we never allow ourselves to just pause, like the charge never goes away. So to hold that is bound energy that is
Yes.
now being taken away from you. And it's
Yes.
exhausting. It's freaking
And
exhausting. And it
others
is
can feel it.
totally. You've all walked into a room and you can cut the tension with a knife. That is a whole room of resistance. So we don't charge after resistance. We acknowledge, whoa, there's a cheetah in a corner. We need to
That's right.
pause here. And I've learned this being the feeler. You don't go into somebody and be like, hey, you're really feeling resistant. Like, what the fuck's up? That's like chasing after that cheetah and it's going to scratch your eyes out. And rightfully so. If we have respect, reverence, and let's wait, pause for it, love. Like if we can, and this is not a reroute, y'all. This isn't like a spiritual bypass, just love. Yes, we are love. That's the ultimate memory of our existence. This is part of our human being. This is part of our human technology that goes, and so can we just bring resistance into the sacred realm and go, wow, there's something here. And honestly, I really feel we almost can't feel, this is what I mean, it's not a solo gig. We can't feel resistance unless we're feeling it within ourselves. So when we walk into the room and can cut the tension with a knife, guess what? You are part of that. And I think that it is absolutely all right to be like, hey, this is energy that I don't want to necessarily marinate in all the time. There might be friend groups and you're going, wow, I'm feeling resistance to it. And that's just the point. It's a guide underneath there that's saying, wait a minute, you keep in this, let's say friend group, I don't know why I'm saying this, like you're feeling all this resistance and you could be going, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I'm feeling this? Versus how can I bow in reverence to say, there's something here for me. What if I can ask myself and be with what's here for you? What's alive in that charge for you? In this particular example, it's not relevant for me right now, but it has been in that resistance that I was feeling in this friend group is I just don't feel like I match. And maybe that is a conversation with your friends. And maybe it's just, wow, I want to go into things that feel more of a life flow, more alive. And when I interface with them, I can feel that. But the point of all of this is the rewrite, and knowing that on the other side is more life for you, is more flow. Everything can get blocked up. And the more that we hold that resistance as a tight stop, or continue to run from it, we never get to the flow. We never unclog the pipe.
Yeah, release that bound energy, like you said. It's doesn't get liberated that way. And I love how you brought up how it to go within, not as the reroute, but as the rewrite. And to me, my question was, I was like, oh, how do I do this with my kids? And how do you help the resistance in the space? How do you help the other person when you feel the resistance come up and you're like, oh, what do I do? And then, like you said, well, naturally, when that comes up, the reason why you even know it's coming is because you can feel it within yourself too. You checking in will liberate that as the breadcrumbs or the guide for the field. So for the other person, because we're all energetic
100%.
beings, and of course that other person's going to feel it. And that was such a aha for me, because I could just picture myself with my kids instead of me trying to talk to them or give them the adult perspective on their
Reason
teenage
it out.
perspective. I can go in and I can go, okay, I don't have to say it out loud. I can just, while standing with them, while being with them, I can go within and go, oh, okay, I'm feeling the resistance. What is that for me? And liberating that for me, even in my mind and in my being, will liberate that for them. And I can trust that that's enough.
Amen to that. Yeah, it's so beautiful what you just said in regard to when you can have more tenderness and love for what comes up for you. When, let's say, using this example, you're seeing your kids be resistant and you're like, Jesus, they're supposed to be doing their homework and they're doing this, blah, 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 all the things. Doesn't mean that that's not really happening. But what is that thing within you that you were just saying to be with the tenderness and the kindness and actually, like, you know what? When they do that, I feel like I resent being a mom. I'm making this up. I'm not saying this is you. Not that we haven't all felt that. I resent being a mom, or I'm a shitty mom, or all these things are actually bound up in that moment when your kid's not doing the thing. That's what we
Yeah.
don't realize. But when you just said, when you go in and go, oh, yeah, okay, because you're now alchemizing some of the stuff that you didn't even realize is coming up, you thought it had nothing to do. And I'm going to go into my reasoning and be like, listen, da, 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 da. And they're like, they're seeing right through that. They're like, woman, stop,
That's right.
pause.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that you're never going to be frustrated or resistant to your kids again here, but it's certainly a beautiful thing. And the other part that I really want to point out and emphasize that you just said is that when you even do that with yourself and can just bring the wait, the pause, and kind of go in and go, okay, what is it that I'm really feeling? Like, what is really frustrating me about them not doing the thing? It's always something about ourselves in that, right? And so as soon as you do that, and you do have a sense of liberation, of alchemization, it shifts the field already without a word. And what thoughts will come then in to even connect with them, the tone of your voice all changes, because it's all energy, and it's the energy of the dynamicism between us that creates those poles of charge. And so when you start taking that charge off because you have done that with yourself, immediately it's different. It's the same thing, the dishes in the sink. My son doesn't live with me anymore, but I was way more resistant and upset than I knew that I should be for just it's dishes. What's the big deal? There's always something for us. There's always, again, to go back to behind the wall of resistance, underneath that is this gift that's been given to us to find and be with more wisdom about ourselves that allows us to take the charge off and actually be able to excise the wisdom. Because if we don't, it's like choking it off. It's choking off the very energy that's actually saying, hey, there's more life for you here that is waiting. It's ready. It's like spring. It's emerging. It has a charge, right? You have to have a seed cracks open and comes through the soil. It's not an easy process. Yeah. Know that you don't have to be all clean and cool and amazing about it. Allow yourself to be a little messy. That seed was this little seed and it just had to crack open and there had to be a lot of energy to do it. And then we're looking at all these daffodils and these tulips and these blossoms, these magnolia blossoms, and they're freaking beautiful. That's the flow of life on the other side of resistance.
I love the rewrite of resistance, I must say. When we thought about this podcast, I was like, resistance, no, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, pass. We'll put that towards the end of the year. I was totally resisting the resistance. And now there's this beautiful appreciation that I have for it. And it's even I'm even remembering just how yesterday I just responded so differently based off these practices, all of these awarenesses, having the conversation together, having the compassion together, bringing the love to the table, bringing it and letting it be at the stoplight because you chose to slow down when it was turning yellow instead of flooring it through. There is so much beauty and appreciation in that I am constantly in awe. And just as a mom speaking from that season in my life, I trust that that is helping my kiddos rewrite that, even though there's so much of socialization and culture and all the things that are still happening. I'm still showing them the rewrite in the smallest or the biggest ways. It matters. And that is that life source energy for me. I feel like it's what makes my heart beat. It's just, it's so good. And my invitation is if you were a resistor of resistance like me, I invite you in that the weather is nice.
It can be choppy too. Sometimes we may be saying no a lot, but we're not necessarily saying no to the right things for the right reasons. The resistance isn't just a no. That's the whole point. And until you can dip down and you're now like that seed that's immersing in the soil and the nutrients, then you may just be like, boom, and you may fly out of that with a really clear no, because sometimes in life we need to say no and it's saying yes to something else. But if the no's are so fragrant or yes, like I've been more on the other end.
Totally.
So it's really powerful just to honor that is the resistance. It's about allowing for the wisdom to come up, allowing yourself to sink into that. It doesn't always have to look pretty. And the second thing I just really wanted to bring up is that allow yourself to go to the body. Your body is the point of liberation. So when you do feel resistance come up, can you start to track what is that feeling in your body? Where is it in your body? What are you noticing? Does it have a heat to it? Does it have a color to it? That's part of the being or the pausing. Can you put your hands on that? Or even go to a place that notice that there's a contrast, meaning that there's some charge in a part of your body and maybe your neck tightens up. Where is there a place simultaneously that doesn't have that tension or charge? Put your hands there, take a breath in your nose, out your mouth, and then go to the resistance and wait with it. Your body literally gives you breadcrumbs. It's right there for you. And it's a really powerful place to get it more embodied in your neurology. And it also is really a huge guide to the freeing or the liberation. So, and it's funny, when I just brought this last part in, I must have said it because I was feeling some stuff in my neck, because every time we do these episodes, there's a vulnerability for me anyways of just saying, hey, I'm going to come on here. We're not saying, hey, this is the way to do this or be this. And as a doctor that has had a practice for so long, traditionally we look to our facilitators to give us the answers. And that's not this. And even in my practice, that's not how I work it. It's really about the invitations of our humanness and how we learn and how we can embody in new ways and really useful ways in our everyday life, because there's a lot happening for all of us just by nature of our culture. So I'm just really grateful for you all listening. And we really do hope that you share with more people. And we're so honored to hear what you want to hear more of, or what things come up for you, and what things or gems that you take away. So thank you so much for resisting with us and not crossing the street too soon, and not, or knowing that you can cross the street. So until next time,
Until next time.
bye. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.
It's in and through the body, all along, in and through the body, all along. It's in and through the body, all along, in and through the body, all along. It's in and through the body, all along, in and through the body. It's in and through the body.